Welcome, everybody. It's Tuesday, and it's the Tuesday after Valentine's Day, so we thought it would be a good time to talk about love and relationships. I'm Sharon Spurlock, and this is our Tuesday Q&A with the Family Support Department. We're going to start off with Madeline Webster. Madeline works for the St. Louis Arc. Tell us a little bit about what you do, Madeline, and then if you could introduce our guest.
Yeah, so I'm Madeline. I'm the transition navigator. So help families of teenagers and young adults figure out what comes next. And as you might imagine, I get lots of calls about healthy relationships and sexuality in this age range. And so I had started taking the lead on setting up some shade groups. Caroline, why don't you introduce yourself and say what that means?
Hello, everyone. My name is Caroline Mustaine, and I work for the YWCA with the SHADE department. SHADE stands for Sexual Health and Disability Education. And so in our class, we kind of cover everything from talking about our feelings and communication to having friends and dating. And then we finally finish that class up with talking about sex and how to stay safe and how to stay healthy as far as our sexual health goes. So we use a lot of different tools in SHADE. We base it off the curriculum from FLASH and Planned Parenthood. So those are our two main curriculums. They are used in high schools, middle schools, everywhere. So they're very evidence-based and very well used and liked.
I'll give a little background on Lucy, who is an incredible self-advocate, who is an officer in our self-advocates group here at the ARC. She's the transition officer. So it's her job to kind of teach other people, peers, about different resources and programs that might be interesting to them. Lucy is a dedicated student and was not willing to miss class to be here today, but Lucy had lots of great things to share in a video. So I'm gonna share that with you all.
Today we have Caroline Mustaine here to present from the SHADE program at the YWCA. SHADE stands for Sexual Health and Disability Education. In SHADE, we learn about how to deal with negative feelings, dating, and even sex. And I'm going to share some things what I learned about from SHADE. I learned about SHADE is we talk about what it's like to be in a healthy relationship or unhealthy relationship. And I have great examples. For a healthy relationship, to be honest and to compromise with each other and get to know each other and try to find what hobbies we like. For an unhealthy relationship is lying is not okay. And some healthy relationships can be based on different types of relationships. I learned that from Caroline too. I love SHADE and I learned a lot. The other one is a friendship. Be friends and hang out with each other and to find interesting facts about each other. The important thing is that SHADE teaches me a lot and I'm happy I am recording this and I am happy. Some facts about Caroline is that she owns three dogs and a bearded dragon. She also enjoys being outside and doing awesome crafts.
Double introductions, Caroline. That's so awesome.
So we have a little mixture of both, but yeah.
I just love Lucy, and it's so clear that she is really excited that she's been able to take these classes. She talked about some things that I want us to unpack a little bit more because she talked about, she was really able to name what makes a relationship a healthy relationship and what are some things that are red flags, that are unhealthy things. And I want to just stay there for a while and talk about a couple things. And the first one is just, why do you think it's important for us to build these skills in young people?
Yeah, it's extremely important. It's really important for everyone with or without a disability. But I think sometimes in our current school system, sometimes the community that we're working with is overlooked. And so they're not getting the specific techniques or different skills that they might have learned in another school type setting. So I'm kind of here to fill in that gap from school to adulthood. And of course, having healthy relationships is important to all of us. It helps build self-esteem. It helps us feel connected to our community. And it also helps create lifelong friendships, which of course is important for our mental health. And so, yeah, Lucy was a great student in my class. I think she took away a lot. And we also had a great conversation the other week about consent and how consent really does play a role in healthy relationships and creating boundaries.
Gosh, those are all such important topics. And from a family perspective, I think families get nervous about, if I talk about this, my family member is going to think it's okay for them to run out and start doing all these things. And so I'd love you to talk about that and really kind of just, I felt like listening to Lucy, she had so many things that she had as her own skills to evaluate what the right thing was to do.
Right. So gaining those skills is extremely important, as we already stated, but being able to come up with some terminology that can also help. For example, one of the big topics we talked about in the beginning of Shade is private and public. And while this might be a pretty obvious thing that, outside is public and maybe in a bedroom or a bathroom is private, these terminologies help us to identify kind of where we're at with what we want to do as far as relationships and physically. And so this kind of starts that groundwork. You mentioned that some families might be nervous about having these conversations because it might spark a thought in someone's mind that maybe we're not ready for. I think that's a very common concern that a lot of parents feel. When we're talking about middle school and high school and even young adults, we're nervous that they are going to start engaging in different relationships that might not be healthy. And I think the important part of Shade and being able to communicate and talk about those things is, so that way they are set up for success. A lot of the students that I work with are not ready to start having sex or start having a physical relationship, and that's okay. But at least learning the terminology, this is hopefully going to help protect them if they're in a situation where maybe they really are unsafe and they're not sure what someone's talking about or what someone's trying to communicate to them. And so this is kind of why we want to have this education before something happens, have that preventative factor in it, instead of reaching out once maybe someone has been touched inappropriately and they're not sure what to do. So we'd really try to get this class going as young as we can, because these skills and topics are something that we deal with lifelong.
Yeah, that was one of the questions we got from someone before we started today is, at what age should I start having this conversation? And if you can also address what age you are able to start working with people, that would be great.
Yeah, so our eligibility does depend on not only age, but also where you are in the St. Louis region. We work with kids 9 and up, and we try to work with people in St. Louis County. However, that doesn't mean that we just ignore the city folks. We do try to include them if that's maybe intermingling them with a group of county folks. We just try to make sure our funding is set up, but we like to work with kids as young as 9. I honestly think that we should be talking about these things like relationships, healthy coping skills, even as young as age 3. Body autonomy is also something that can be talked about as young as age 3. So really any age is a great age to start.
Can you talk about body autonomy? I love that topic for really small kids. And I think aunties like me are really culprits in not establishing those. So that's something that we all as family members maybe should think about.
Yeah, body autonomy is something I think being more talked about now. And so for a lot of us, we weren't, I guess, introduced to those words or that belief until recently. But what having body autonomy means is having control over your own body. That means I'm going to control who touches me. I'm going to also control how they touch me. So for example, I am not a big hugger. I do not like hugs. And so if I am meeting a big group of friends, no hugs. I am probably going to go up and give people high fives. I am not going to hug people. If someone does come up to me and try to give me a hug, I might say, "Ooh, I'm not right now," or I'm not a big hugger. matter. But that is one example of me showing my body autonomy. I'm not going to let others touch me in a way that I don't want to be touched.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm going to shift over to you, Madeline, because I just hate that you haven't had a chance to jump in, and you can comment on anything we've talked about so far. But I know you sat in on a few of these SHADE classes. I'm wondering if there were specific teaching techniques that Caroline used that you thought were really effective with the folks that you helped sign up.
Yeah, I'll say the first thing that I would mention is that I think you can also do it more than once. I was just talking to a parent about this who's had a daughter maybe do it 3 times now, because repetition is key, which we know about any other kind of education. So that's true here too. I think it's been really cool watching people open up and have some unique conversations that they may not feel like they can have other places. I get lots of calls from parents about these topics, but I mean, I don't think my mom super loved having that conversation with me either. And it's okay to not love having that conversation. And it's kind of nice to maybe push it off on to people like Caroline who are getting paid to do it, because it can be a little awkward and uncomfortable. And I'll say, it can be awkward and uncomfortable, but they're still having fun. They're still doing games. They're still making each other laugh. They're being awkward together. I'm trying to remember which call I was on, and a guy that I know through a few different programs came on and he said, "This sure is an awkward subject, isn't it?" I thought, you know what?
I get that a lot.
I appreciate you calling out the elephant in the room, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I have been in the building when we used to have the classes here when they were being offered, and there's always a ton of laughing going on. I know one of the strategies that SHADE uses is making sure we give people, you said the vocabulary, that we teach people the real words for body parts and that they understand slang so that they know what people's saying to them. And when you start asking young adults and teenagers about slang words, they think that is very, very funny and maybe embarrassing. So it's been fun to listen to them. But I also see them building skills that are so important for their self-esteem, which is exciting. So in terms of the groups of folks that you work with, how do you accommodate people with a variety of maybe learning styles and communication styles? What are some of the ways? I mean, you had to have adapted these materials for people with disabilities.
Yes, of course. So we work with a wide range of individuals, anything from someone that maybe can't hear to maybe some language barriers. And so I really try to use all different types of learning. So we're using audio learning, people that listen, visual learning. I like pictures, I like videos. I'm working on getting more hands-on activities. And so I'm really trying to communicate to each learner. I know we all learn so differently. So really getting to know the student, I can always adapt different lessons or different activities based on their needs. But what's great about SHADE is we do work with a wide variety of individuals. So we kind of have all different tools and techniques that we can pull in. But yeah, there's no limits on who we can work with as long as they're really in that St. Louis County and follow our eligibility requirements.
So the work you do with us is small group sessions, but are you also able to offer one-on-one if somebody has a specific skill that they might need to have privacy for, or that they maybe have such a difference in learning that they might need a different kind of environment?
Yeah, and one thing I like to add is that with our groups, we have a very set in stone curriculum. I'm going to be covering certain topics on certain days. However, when we get to the individual, it's really whatever that individual wants. So I've met with people to discuss appropriate workplace behavior or maybe specific issues within a relationship that they want to talk to. So the great thing about the individual is we can be a little bit more specific. So that's kind of our difference between the group and the individual is what we talk about, and I guess how in depth we go on each subject.
Yeah, that's a great example, because there's so many people I know that have maybe had made a mistake at work and said something that seemed too flirty or invasive or crossed a boundary, and they were getting into trouble. And so having that resource is so nice. We do have a couple questions. I'm going to let in whoever feels like jumping in, answer them. The first one, I want to know what kind of things you help people do to plan for a good date night.
Yeah, so we talk about everything on what to wear, on how to look, how to act. Even we might do some questions and do some role play. I think a lot of people feel really anxious about their first date or kind of what's going to happen. And so one thing I can help do is we talk through what a first date looks like. What would it look like if it went really well? And what would it look like if it doesn't go so well? I like to prepare people for both situations because we never really know when it comes to dating. And another thing we talk
Great.
about as far as dating is how to stay safe. And a big part of that is how do we contact these people and where do we go to hang out? And so making sure that we're setting up almost a safety plan on how we're going to remain safe throughout this date and afterwards, that's always important.
Absolutely. Were you going to add something, Madeline? I see we had a follow-up question about how do I even find a date?
We talk about that in Shade too. We talk about where we meet people, where we shouldn't meet people. We also talk about online dating apps. That's a big thing nowadays. And there are some really great apps that are pretty safe out there. Of course, we have to talk about how to be safe online, and that's another part of the class, but we do talk about how to find a date or how to get that ball rolling.
I was going to say, I'd be remiss not to mention that Safe Circle Coalition hosts quick connection events.
Yes, I think that those have been such great opportunities, and I'm just going to put it out there to any young women in the audience. So we often have more guys than girls. So if you're out there looking for a guy, actually, whether you're a male or a female, you might just want to come and join us because we need a variety of people to come to these events. And they're very structured. So those dating events are fun. They've got there was practice flirting at one of them. There was going to be Pokemon Go gaming. So we try and target a lot of things that are going to be fun for different types of people. So I'm going to give my thumbs up to that. So there's a question in the chat about what if I have a seizure on the date? And I think that could really be applied to maybe any kind of awkward situation that you can either imagine could happen or maybe something unexpected. What are some of you guys, what would you advise people? If you've got a seizure disorder and maybe when you're nervous, you tend to have a seizure and you know this is going to be a nervous situation.
Yeah, I think this kind of comes into when we first meet someone, what do we share about ourselves? Sometimes we don't want to talk about our disability or, something that might happen that could happen during a date, like a seizure. However, this is the thing that I do think is important, that we do talk about what might happen. This helps other people understand us, but it also keeps us safe. So for example, if someone did have a seizure on a date, most likely the ambulance would need to be called. The person we're on a date with probably doesn't know how to necessarily deal with someone having a seizure. And so even just giving them a warning of, hey, sometimes I have seizures. This is how I want to be treated. And this is kind of what it looks like. I think that not only will give you more confidence going into that date, but it will also give your date the confidence that he or she could take care of anything if something was to go wrong. Madeline, did you have something else to add? I know you were about to say something.
Yeah, I've actually had a seizure on a date. So I have not a seizure disorder, but I have a lower threshold for seizures than the average person. So I have them more than people who typically don't have seizure disorders. And it is a little awkward. And it's, I can relate. It feels really vulnerable when you've had a seizure because you don't feel like yourself. You don't feel like you know exactly how you're acting. It can be a little disorienting. And I think maybe even a little embarrassing, even if that's not how it should feel. So yeah, I agree though. If you give somebody kind of a heads up, then you can kind of head that off. It is always a little nerve-wracking to disclose about disability. Actually, and I'm sure this is something, Caroline, you and Lucy have talked about, because Lucy's brought it up with me and she's used such great language about it that I know she's been talking to somebody, but she would talk about whether or not to disclose and what it's like to talk about your disability with somebody. And if they decide that they don't want to be with you because of your disability, how that might feel. What did that conversation look like? Because I've only heard these like great insights from Lucy after the fact, but I'm curious how that conversation even came up.
Yeah, in our class, we do talk about, how to prepare for a first date and kind of what information we're willing to disclose. And I know earlier in this conversation, I talked about public and private and the importance of those words. So we talk about what's public information, what's private information, what information is going to keep me safe. And so when it comes to disability, I think you do have to make that choice if you feel comfortable or not disclosing. However, we do have to look at it from a safety standpoint. We've all heard of those horrible online dating situations where you show up to a date and it's someone that looks totally different, or it's a totally different person than you even imagined. Some of these expectations that we put on the other person that we're going to go meet are ones we make up in our head. And we have to be very careful about this. And we also have to be careful about that other person's expectations of us. So this is why a lot of times we do share disability information, just to give that person the full picture of who they're meeting. We wanted them to feel safe coming into that date, as well as we want to feel safe. We want to know who we're with. And it also might be beneficial because sometimes we have different behaviors or different, I don't know the word, just little personality quirks that sometimes it would help if someone knew. And I'll give you guys an example. Sometimes I talk a lot when I get anxious or nervous. And so I might let someone know, hey, if I start rambling, it's just because I'm excited and nervous. I'm not giving them a full diagnosis of my medical history, but I'm also giving them a little piece that might help them on the date if I start rambling.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there are strategies for dates. We've got another question about, what to do if you're shy or whatever other kinds of interaction skills you have or areas where you feel uncomfortable. I'm sure there's ways you can strategize about that for planning dates and just ways to meet people. Do you guys have tips?
I think role playing for me is something that really works. I like to role play best case scenario and worst case scenario. So then when I'm going into a situation, I feel like no matter what, I'm prepared. I do this a lot in my classes, those role playing situations. I might be a horrible date to some of you guys, just because we all have those situations where our date does not go perfectly. And that's okay. But it's about preparing for it and then being safe.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things I like the most about watching the series Love on the Spectrum is that they are all pretty straightforward at the end saying, yeah, that one didn't really do it for me, or I think this part went well. They were just very frank about the fact that you do need to date more than one time, that you've got to go out with a lot of people sometimes before you find people that you really click with. So we have some questions too about dating people with disabilities, dating people without disabilities. And you kind of talked a little bit about that in regards to disclosure. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about if we have ever helped anybody that was in that kind of a situation.
Yeah, I've worked with individuals that are dating a variety of people. And so really, there's no one type for anyone. We all kind of have to figure out what's important to us and what we're looking for in a partner. That might be someone with a similar disability, or it might be someone without one. I don't think that totally matters when it comes to dating. It's just about what makes you feel comfortable and what makes you happy in a relationship.
Yeah, I love that. We did have a follow-up question about the role playing and not wanting to role play with your parents. So I'm just going to tell everybody who's out there, if you can come to some shade classes, you'll get a chance to practice with some potential new friends or old friends. And the other thing is, I think that relationships are a really good time for you to look at your group of supporters. Do you have a brother or sister that you feel comfortable talking to that about, or an aunt? Maybe you've got a neighbor who you're close to, or somebody from school, like a guidance counselor. There may be people that are in your life that have a different relationship that you could say, I'd really like to practice this piece out with, and feel out whether they're comfortable enough to do that. So yeah, somebody wrote a wingman. Everybody needs a wingman. That's my opinion. The last question in the chat is about long-term relationships, and this might be something you handle more as an individual thing, but do you help people who, when they get to the stage where they've been together for a while and they want to think about, do I want to have them meet my family? Do we want to live together? Do we want to get married? What was that? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so like I said before, I work with a wide variety of individuals. So I mean anywhere from age 9 to 80. So with that demographics, we have a lot of people in different life situations. I've worked with married couples, engaged couples, individuals that are recently lost their parents and so are living on their own for the first time. So really, there's no situation that we haven't worked with yet. Like you said, I think if you do have specific questions, maybe about a long-term relationship, then the individual route would definitely be for you. And another great thing I want to add is we don't just have groups and individuals. We have everything. So that means that if someone wants to meet with their parents and have a family session, or if someone wants to meet with their significant other and have kind of a couple session, we can do that. So whatever really makes our clients comfortable, and kind of whatever way they feel like they're going to get the most from Shade is how we want to do it.
I was going to say,
That's cool.
There was a referral I know at one point for a couple that came together that had some sort of logistical questions around sex, because they were a couple who was ready for that and who had some sort of questions about where their disability played a role in that decision. And sort of, I think, mechanically what it might look like to some extent. But I think it was kind of cool that they had a space where they could ask those questions and get them answered in a way that, they didn't necessarily have to ask maybe their staff who are in and out of their lives, playing a different role than that. Maybe it's not something they're as comfortable with, or who they had kind of a safe place to go and ask those questions that I don't think they were going to find very easily in Google. So I was really grateful that we were able to link you guys up.
Right. And, sometimes it's just not knowing the mechanics, or sometimes not understanding things. Other times there might be a physical limitation that certain things might not work in a relationship, or certain physical things might not be easy. And so we talk about kind of alternatives and how someone can feel sexually or emotionally satisfied without getting the stereotypical, behavior with that.
So we have a question in the chat, and I'm going to expand it a little bit. How do you connect what people are learning and what their priorities are? How do you balance privacy with sharing with the people that care about them, whether it's paid staff or family members? Are you able to tell them about the topics that you're covering in the different Shade sessions? Do you encourage people to go back and talk to people about what they've learned? How do we translate that so in their everyday life they've got the right support?
Yeah, it totally, I think, depends on what we're working on and who the client is. So one big thing is if someone is over the age of 18 and they're signing all the forms themselves, that means I'm not going to share anything that they tell me in session with anyone. That doesn't matter if it's their parent or their caseworker. I might share that we met but I won't share what we talk about. As far as I've worked with individuals in the place of employment with behaviors. And so in that situation, I did have a release to have meetings with both the employer and the employee. We had meetings together, we had meetings separate, but what we were really trying to do is brainstorm how this individual could be successful at work. And so who I talk to and when all really depends on the release. As far as our classes go, our subjects are very known. I will send out a little informational sheet on the subjects we talk about. And so I do encourage you to have these conversations with your students later, even ask them, what did you guys talk about? There are weeks that we go in a little bit more in depth in certain subjects, or weeks that we kind of glaze over if this class doesn't seem to need the more specific or the extra information. But yeah, I always encourage anytime we have a support group to be talking about classes, talk about maybe our own belief system or morals as far as when it comes to sex and relationships. So I do encourage those conversations.
Wonderful. I think it's such a great program. I'm going to give you guys both a chance to have a closing statement. Before I do that, I just want to say that one of the things I thought about while we were talking is that we also have some counselors on staff, and they've done premarital counseling and couples counseling as well. So there's multiple options for you to get that kind of a resource. And I did want to point out that Shade offers both Healthy Relationships 1 and Healthy Relationships 2. And Healthy Relationships 1 are really those building block skill about understanding boundaries, understanding public versus private, having some conversational, social skills kinds of activities. So you can take Healthy Relationships 1 several times before you decide whether or not to go into Healthy Relationships 2. So I know that's something that we're going to hopefully get on the books for the spring to start having some Shade classes again. So be on the lookout for that. So without further ado, Madeline, anything you want to close out with?
I just want to say this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I think that, knowledge is power. And I think the more we can equip people to protect themselves and take good care of themselves, the better job we're doing. So I'm really grateful for this collaboration so that we can help people to do that.
Yeah, I second what Madeline says. Knowledge is power. I think that all of us have gone through situations where it's like, oh, I wish I would have known that, or, oh, that's what that means. And so I think Shade is just trying to help fill in those little blanks. And like I said, if anyone's interested in taking classes, feel free to reach out to me at the YWCA. Email is probably the best way to get a hold of me. And I know Madeline and Sharon both know my email, and so we will make sure everyone has that.
All right. Well, you guys, thank you so much. I too, I think this is really important. I've been involved with the Safe Circle Coalition for a long, long time. And more times than not, you can see a difference in somebody when they have the information they need to speak up for themselves and to make decisions that are good in their lives. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Caroline and Madeline.
Bye. Thank you.